it is so much better to have Narcan and never need to use it than be in a situation where you need it and you don't have it.
Poached speaks with Ellen Wirshup, Program Manager of Project Red, an initiative from the Alano Club of Portland. With Project Red, Ellen is working to raise awareness around overdose prevention and increase the availability and accessibility of overdose prevention supplies and training in the service industry and community-based organizations.
My name is Ellen. I have worked in the restaurant industry for a decade. And so a big part of why Project Red was created was because of my experience in the restaurant industry. In my recovery, there were a lot of people that I don't like using the word left behind, but there were a lot of people who were still dealing with their own substance use and misuse issues. And I watched a lot of them pass away, and a lot of them experience opiate overdoses, especially accidentally because of fentanyl. And so I was working just my normal bar job. I think I was working 2 jobs at the time. I got the information, or I got the message that my friend had died. She was a really, really close teenage friend of mine. We consumed substances together. We drank a lot in parks together. We were really close when we were younger. And then we were a little less close as we both got older. Lives pulled us apart in different directions, but she worked in the service industry as well. And I got sober, and she continued on. And essentially what had happened was she bought some pressed pills that I think she thought were potentially Percocet or something like that. I don't really have any way of knowing, but that's a lot of what's out right now, is these pressed pills masking basically as like Percocet or Oxys, things like that. So that they're opiates. You just don't know that there's a lethal amount of fentanyl in them. Mm-hmm. And so she took the pill. No one knows what happens next, except that her boyfriend found her. She had passed away. And then he took the same pressed pill, not knowing, of the same bag or the same batch, not knowing that that was what had killed her. And he died as well.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And it was just a real, it wasn't a shock, because it's always a shock, right? It's always surprising to lose someone, but it's never, coming from a big community of drug users and being one myself, we go to funerals, you have a lot of people that you lose, whether drug and alcohol related or mental health related. It's just the nature of getting older. You lose people, right? But I was really devastated, and I felt really angry. I was so mad at, I got sober right before the kind of wave of fentanyl really hit the West Coast and really hit Portland specifically. It was always around, and the East Coast got it a lot, in a lot greater quantities and a lot sooner than we did. And so I really missed that moment, but I was not a person that tested my drugs. I was not a person that was careful about usage. I was a person that used alone. And so all of those things we tell people now, test your substances, don't use alone, stagger your using. Those were things that I wasn't doing. And I felt really lucky, and I felt really angry, and I was really sad. And I remember sitting with my friend at a river, and I was just talking to them, and I was like, well, what if I just got a bunch of Narcan and brought it into bars and just saw who wanted it? And that was what I did. I went to the Alano Club of Portland, which is where I had gotten my Narcan previously. And someone handed me a case, and I just started walking to bars in that neighborhood that I had known either, I know someone who had passed on who was working at a bar up there from a fentanyl related overdose or fentanyl poisoning. And I know that heavy substance use can happen in those bars and all bars. And so I just started on foot. I got, people were interested, but a lot of people wanted it to be a more I didn't have business cards. I didn't have pamphlets. I didn't know how to explain, what the intention behind it. I just wanted some buffer, right? I wanted to do something. And I met, I had already had a friend who works for the Alano Club of Portland. He's essentially the second in command. And I was talking to him about it. His name is Casey Anderson. I was talking to him about it one day. And he was like, well, I think that we could make that a position for you. I think that that could be a project, distribution and training of how to administer Narcan could be a project that, you run, and which is terrifying, because there's a lot of impact that goes into like I was a bartender and a server. I started as a host 10 years ago at Portland City Grill. And now all of a sudden I'm like, we launched on August 31st. And then all of a sudden it was like off to the races. I poached or not poached, you're poached, Eater PDX did an article about us kind of right off the bat, very, very soon after, did an interview with me. And after that, there was a excess of people who were reaching out saying that this is something they were interested in. And so then it became like every day, I was walking in and dropping off Narcan. I would train staff how to use it. I would train one individual who, and then like send videos along. They're really, really easy instructional videos. And I'm happy to send you the link to that as well. It's like a 6 or 7 minute long video that just tells you what to do in the experience, or like in the case where you see someone experience an opiate overdose and how to administer Narcan.
Right.
I went on tour with Pearl Jam.
Yeah, that's what Jake said.
which was wild. I had to listen to a lot of their music before I went, like really re-up myself there. But doing that really launched the project in big ways, even outside of Portland and outside of Oregon. We would go to these different cities in these different states, on the East Coast, and do these demonstrations and work with other groups that were out there who were already doing that work. And it was very powerful,
that's awesome.
Terrifying. But I mean, it's funny, like it did start because I was just so scared and I was just so angry, and it really grew into something that like I do now out of love instead of fear.
And it sounds like you kind of touched on it, but like how has the industry responded? It sounds like you had a lot of people that were like totally interested in it. Is that still the case?
And then some people that weren't, and then some people that really wanted to know more about the legality and the liability. There were I had a lot of contacts in the restaurant industry, obviously because of my work, and so a lot were the first ones that I reached out to, right? I'm like, I know you, I've either worked with you or worked beside you, and those people were really supportive. I think that nobody is blind to what's happening, right?
It's in the media like all the time. There's a crisis.
It's in the media. It's in, we're so connected to it, especially now as like fentanyl becomes one of the most prominent substances in not only in, on its own, but like in our other drugs. People are really afraid. And the thing is, like, I was a drug user myself. I don't tell anyone not to use drugs. That's insane. And I don't think those methods work. I just don't think anyone should be dying because of their choice to use drugs. And so, I started going in and, like I would reach out to people. I would just walk into a bar. Like I'd be out at a bar with friends and then I would just walk up and I'd be like, is this something you're interested in? Or like I'd have people reach out to me saying like either this is something they've had, like they've witnessed someone experience an opiate overdose before, or they're worried about it happening. And then there were people who are really afraid of what they think of as enabling. They think that let people know that they have Narcan and we have Narcan here, that it's gonna, cause more people to come and use substances on their property. And the thing is, like, have a bathroom door that locks, people are going to use drugs in your bathroom. It goes. And also like nobody needs to know you have Narcan. And that was, I think, the selling point with a lot of, like, there are a lot of partners that I work with in the community who really want to remain anonymous because they don't want people to know they have Narcan, but they're more than happy to carry it. And I'm like, that's great, right? There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it prohibits us from breaking down stigma a little bit more, but the point is to have like mass accessibility of Narcan. And I chose bars and restaurants, strip clubs, coffee shops, entertainment venues, because that was the industry that I worked in, but also a lot of the kind of folks that I lost were people who worked in that industry. And I know that it's an industry where a lot of people struggle with substance dependency and substance misuse and abuse. And
Right.
so I also wanted to create a space where if they needed help or they needed access to this thing, they'd have an easier way to get a hold of it, as opposed to having to, like, you know, not so discreetly go out of their way to find it. Or so it was always the intention of, I want this on hand so that, you know, the managers and the owners and like the service workers know what to do if they see someone experiencing an opiate overdose. I also want to leave space available for if there's, you know, a staff member who has their own struggles, or a family member or friend with struggles, so they can also have Narcan available and they know where to get it.
Yeah, and I can see how, like, you know, building awareness would normalize it to a point that it would be just like in a safety kit. You know, it's normal to have a safety kit with Band-Aids and aspirin and all that stuff in a, you know, in a bar or kitchen or whatever. So
I mean, it's you'd have an EpiPen if you work at a restaurant, and allergies happen.
yeah.
You know, we're fully prepared on the off chance of any kind of accident, except for this really big thing that's also happening right now. That is the number one leading cause of death in people ages 18 to 45.
Yeah, and I'm sure we've all, you know, just, I come from the industry as well, and I know that I've had experience with coworkers that have had, you know, have been through addiction and opioid addiction, you know, specifically. And so it is something that I think we all experience, or, you know, not everybody, but a lot of people do experience, and just, you know, maybe don't think how they can help or have this kind of awareness to bring it into the restaurant industry.
Yeah. And I also, like, one of the things I really like to talk about when I do training is this idea that so I'm born and raised in Portland. I'm from this city, and I've seen the massive changes that it's gone through. And I've also felt the way that it's shifted as more people have moved here and become what feels to me like less of a community. It used to feel very, you know, like 10, 15 years ago, it used to feel very community driven. You knew all of your, now there's a lot of separation. And so one of the things that I really like to lead with is this idea that we're building community. You know, like, I am guilty of being one of those people who, if I saw someone laying on the street, I just want to walk past him as quickly as possible, right? Leave them alone. You know, they're having their own experience. And now I look, you know, I check to see, like, are the underneaths of their fingernails blue? Is their breathing raspy or shallow or shaky? You know, like, those things are things I'm consciously aware of now.
Right.
We're losing people at a really unprecedented rate. And like, you know, we all as a, you know, collective society don't check on each other nearly as much as I think that we should start doing, especially, you know, we don't know who's going through what, but we especially don't know if the person that's lying there is experiencing an opiate overdose. You know, we don't all know the signs, and we're not all aware, and we don't all carry Narcan.
Yeah, for sure. And that is like one of the things, because before I started working for Poached, I worked in a bar, and, like, you know, I experienced people who were falling asleep and they're not allowed to, so you tell them to wake up or they have to leave. But, like, I wouldn't know how to identify an overdose situation. So I mean, I think just being in the industry, I mean, everybody should be aware, but that's the kind of thing, like, because you don't know, you'd rather just, like, turn away from it. But it's important to be aware and, you know, of common symptoms. So I think that the training is a really interesting aspect too, because, like, how do you train people to identify it and, like, know when to give someone Narcan?
Yeah, I mean, I think, essentially what you're looking at is, so what happens when someone's experiencing an opiate overdose, or basically what happens when someone puts opiates into their body, is the body is becoming so relaxed that you're not breathing fast enough. And so your brain actually isn't getting enough oxygen. And so the biggest thing, like, your window before brain death starts to occur is about 3 to 5 windows. So these signs that you're checking for look a lot like the signs of someone deprived of oxygen. So you're going to see a lot paler or ashier quality of skin underneath the fingernail beds. Around the mouth is going to be a blue, a purple, a gray, basically not a flesh tone color. You won't be able to get this person's attention. And so a lot of times we'll say, like, hey, you know, just yell, like, I'm going to call 911. Nobody wants the cops called on them if they, you know, drugs in their system. Nobody wants the cops called on them in general, probably. But And then, or say like, I'm gonna Narcan you. That's a really great way to see, nobody wants to be Narcan. So most often, if they're moving around, if they're shifting, if they're, talking, mumbling, that's not an overdose. It might be a really deep nod, in which case we don't need to step in, but we can keep, checking back.
Right.
So the biggest thing that I think you want to look, I mean, like if you can't get their attention, if you rub your knuckles up and down their sternum, you can knock on bone, collarbone, shoulder blade is a really good part to do that. Just knock hard, but not painfully hard. Someone experiencing an opiate overdose is not protecting their body. You don't need to cause them physical harm. You just need to like rub and apply enough pressure to see if you can wake them up. A big sign that you want to look for is a change in breathing. So we call it like a death rattle. It's going to be really slow. If you think about like holding your own breath or breathing at a really slow rate, you're going to start to feel yourself get really lightheaded. You're like, listen for a snoring sound, a choking sound, a rasping sound. If you hear those things at a really slow rate, most likely it's an opiate overdose. Now, the cool thing about Narcan, naloxone, which is the medicine, Narcan, I have a little guy here, which is the name brand of the nasal spray, is if you don't have any opiates in your system, nothing's going to happen to you.
Okay.
So like if someone is just very drunk and passed out, you can Narcan them. Nothing's going to happen.
They won't know, yeah.
Like I have no opiates in my system. If I Narcan myself, it would just taste kind of funny. That's it.
Yeah.
So the way that naloxone works is it blocks the opiate receptors from working in the brain. Sometimes it only takes one dose and people pop right back up. Sometimes it can take a couple doses, and I'll kind of go through that. The biggest thing is if you don't have Narcan available, which a lot of people don't, rescue breathing works just as well to keep someone alive long enough until the paramedics show up. And so as soon as you someone who you expect is experiencing an opiate overdose, call the paramedics or assign someone else the job. People's brains, we start panicking, the amygdala goes into overdrive. And then all of a sudden, like everyone is trying to think of something to do. It's really important to assign someone a task. You go get the Narcan, you go call the paramedics. You don't need to say that drugs were consumed. You honestly don't actually know the answer to that. So all you need to say is that someone's passed out, their breathing is really, really slow, they are turning blue, or XYZ, you can list the symptoms you see and we need help. This is the address, etc. I am not a trained professional in CPR, but essentially rescue breathing is just a 4-second inhale for yourself, 1 second exhale into their mouth. You want to lay them down on their back. Watch out for their head because they're not protecting their head. Try to get another person to help you do this because bodies are very heavy.
Yeah.
Lay them down, tilt their chin back, plug their nose, open their mouth, and then just 1 second exhale. It's like you're blowing out birthday candles. You just want to watch their chest rise. If their stomach rising, it means you're blowing breath into their stomach. That's not them getting oxygen. So try to see if their chest is rising. And you can do this until the paramedics show up if you don't have Narcan. People don't know this. We also, we're in a pandemic. And so a lot of people don't think like, I don't want to put my mouth on that person, but you can save someone's life who's experiencing an opiate overdose just by administering rescue breathing.
Right.
Now the Narcan part. What's really cool about the nasal spray Narcan is that all it needs to do is coat the mucous membrane inside the nostril. And so it looks like this. Your plunger is here at the bottom. Put your fingertips up like that. Put it up their nose until the nostril touches your fingertips and plunge.
Okay.
So this would be one box of Narcan. There's 2 of these doses inside one box. And there are so many instruction manuals inside this box. There's one on an opening flap right there. There's a sheet inside, and there are sheets inside. The packaged individuals look like this inside each box. So there's even more instructions. So like there's no way you can mess up, right? There's clearly written out for you if you forget all this information.
Right.
But basically, inside each of one of these is 1 4 milligram dose. So you don't want to do any test plunges because you'll waste all of your medicine.
Right.
Stick your nose until it touches the fingertips, plunge, and then wait 3 minutes. And the reason why we're waiting is because unless you notice a sign like immediately and someone pops up, you're not going to notice very many changes in that period of time. What you're looking for is breathing to start to return back to normal. Skin tone is going to take a little bit longer to return, but naloxone, which is the which is the name of the medicine, and Narcan causes very immediate withdrawal symptoms, and withdrawal is painful. And a lot of times, I think when we're in this panic mode, we want to dose until somebody wakes up because we're scared and we want to see them, breathing and revived again.
Right. You don't know if it's working.
Exactly. And like, we know that 3 minutes is a long time. 3 minutes when you're for a cocktail to go out feels like forever, but it's really important because we don't want to cause someone undue harm. And someone who has either a very large amount of an opiate in their system or who has long-term opiate use, that withdrawal is going to be really painful, really uncomfortable. There's going to be a lot of nausea. It's unnecessary to do over and over and over again. And so if you give a 3-minute window, it's enough time to see if there are any changes. Now, after that 3 minutes, administer your second dose that's in the box if you don't notice any of that. It gives you about 6 minutes. Paramedics should hopefully be there by then. If not, just continue administering rescue breathing. If you are worried about somebody asphyxiating or you start to notice those signs of someone, maybe they're about to throw up, just tilt them on their side. There are really easy instructions on rescue positions. Basically, it's just one arm out and the opposite knee and lay them like that. Like I said, the cool thing is that like Narcan doesn't do anything to you if you have other substances in your system. It also works on any and all opiates. So that's going to be kind of pill that's going to be, your basically man-made opiates. So fentanyl is one of them. And it works on any and all fentanyl analogs. So like, I think that's the really nice thing is that like, no matter what somebody has consumed, like say somebody's in a bar bathroom doing a couple lines of cocaine, all of a sudden you start to notice those signs. And even though they have the cocaine in their system, but you see those signs of them experiencing an opiate overdose, you start to notice those changes happening. You can Narcan them and it will work on the opiate no matter what. Sometimes, depending on how much of a substance someone has in their system, you'll have to dose them multiple times. Typically, when I do distribution, I'll give a couple boxes depending on neighborhood, depending on what their needs are, what their preference is, and then I'll always re-deliver. So if they go through it, which some of the places do, either they've given it to someone else or they've had to administer, I'll continue making deliveries. We also have a mail-based distribution program through Next Distro, which I'll give you the website too, where people can order Narcan as an individual who live in the state of Oregon to be delivered to them, and we mail that as well.
You did touch on a little bit, and I know I don't really have it totally in these questions, so if you don't want to cover it, that's fine. But you mentioned that some people are worried about the legalities of it. And like, I know you hear, if somebody falls, you don't want to touch them because you might be liable if you cause more pain or something like that. Are there legalities like that to be aware of?
Good Samaritan law. So no matter what, across the board, Good Samaritan law says you can administer Narcan to someone and not be liable if something happens to them. So if you come across someone who's, experiencing an opiate overdose, you administer Narcan, they wake up, they might be grumpy. The first thing I want to say, nobody's ever like angry or trying to fight you when they wake up.
Right. Yeah. And if they're experiencing withdrawal,
people are confused. They don't know what has happened. And so if there's a bunch of people like kneeling over them, freaking the heck out, I'm trying really hard not to
swear. You can swear. We're swear approved.
I love it. Approved. If there's a bunch of people, like standing over them, freaking out, like that person is going to be even more confused.
Right.
You want to be gentle. You want to be compassionate. Let them know what happened. Let them know that you've administered Narcan. Most people know what that is. That the paramedics are on their way. Something that's really important to note, Narcan works in the system from anywhere between about 45 minutes to 90 minutes, so an hour and a half. A lot of people will refuse paramedics. A lot of people will refuse the ambulance, will refuse the help. I don't know about you, but I don't want to pay $3,000 for an ambulance.
Right.
So more often than not, people are going to say like, no, I'm fine. Like, I just want to go. If you can, try to keep someone with them for at least that 90-minute window to see if potentially they go back into experiencing overdose, because that can happen depending on how much of a substance someone has consumed.
Okay.
Otherwise, another reason why I will give a location a couple boxes, which would total be 4 doses, is that they might say, oh, this person really wants to leave. We're just going to give them one of these boxes of Narcan, let them go off. But like, by administering Narcan to someone, you are saving their life, right? You're not going to be sued for that. And like, because of the Good Samaritan law, you're not going to be sued for administering Narcan to someone. Now, there are different situations in doing chest compressions. I don't ever recommend doing chest compressions.
Right.
We're not trained in
And
CPR.
that's like,
Generally, yeah. And they're not necessary. Rescue breathing is great, but like I said, if you're worried about asphyxiation, just tilt that person on their side and let the Narcan do its job. I think people's concerns with legality and liability is what prevents them from, it's what prevents them from having Narcan on hand. I did a staff training with a business, and they were, and I gave them the Narcan, and while the staff was really excited about, learning all of this, there was a lot of pushback about like, well, we need to talk to our lawyers, and we, and it's like, but like, if you're not going to use this in experience where someone has an opiate overdose, and I'm like, I'm not here to shame somebody. I know there is fear around acting in that situation, but like, do you really want to shut down your bar because someone has died on your premises after experiencing this overdose, where then the OLCC is definitely going to come in and do a check. You're also probably going to have to shut down for at least a few days, like it's basically about like, how do you want to act? Like, who do you want to be in this situation?
Yeah.
So I think like, like in terms of like legality and liability, like there's no liability for administering Narcan to someone. Anyone else who has any other fears, like they are welcome to talk to their lawyers and dig in and do that research. But I think it's not carrying Narcan because of that fear. Like, you have no idea what could happen, and like, we're just here trying to keep people from dying,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel like it seems like it should almost be a requirement, at a state level kind of thing, just like having this, like I said earlier, like having a safety kit.
Yeah.
But especially like, I know the venues you kind of, from what I just read on your site, you're doing music venues, bars, nightclubs, that kind of thing. Like, drug use happens there. There's no like question around it.
Yeah. And like drugs are fun. Like drugs are bad, and people that use drugs aren't bad. And like, people go off and they want to have a good time. Like, we sell drugs for a living. Like, we sell alcohol. I sell alcohol. I'm not going to shame or judge anyone for consuming that. I'm not going to shame or judge anyone for consuming drugs. Drugs are fun, but nobody should die from consuming them,
Yeah.
So like, that's the part where it's like, if we're all just prepared on the off chance that this happens, when I went on this tour, and ever since starting doing this work, I have met so many people. We're all like, we like joke about the 6 degrees of separation, but like in Portland and in the industry, it's like 2 degrees of separation. But it's the same thing for knowing someone who's lost someone to an overdose.
Right.
And, I hear a lot of really sad stories, and there's so many like of the what ifs, or like, God, I wish we had that. It is so much better to have Narcan and never need to use it than be in a situation where you need it and you don't have it. Right.
And the training aspect too, like just to train your staff on that, like that's a valuable lesson to have, especially if you're working in the industry, whether you're working for one employer that does have Narcan on hand and one employer that doesn't, and you move on to an employer that doesn't. At least you always have that knowledge of like signs to identify it and actions you take even without Narcan to make a difference.
We fall into that, like, the fight or flight of like, God, what do I do? Like, I'm freezing, like, I don't know what to do. And like, this just gives me a little bit more confidence in like being able to act if I'm ever presented with that situation. And that's what it does, hopefully, for everyone else. And like, having the training, I think, is really important, because then, if your staff members, if your, bartender and your server are seeing the situation going on, like one of them knows like, well, I know where the Narcan is. I'll go grab that. You call the paramedics, et cetera, et cetera. And then everybody is just like, it's easier. It gets easier.
Right.
There's not fear that comes up. I mean, there's a lot of adrenaline, but
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not a situation anybody would want to be in, but like you might be in it. And so can individuals also contact you for it? Like, because I could see, a lot of industry folk go out, we all, support one another.
yeah.
Like, to the bar afterwards. So could like somebody from the industry just get in touch to get it themselves, or do you have to just give it to businesses?
No, I mean, individuals should carry Narcan. I get a lot of emails a day from just like individual random people being like, this is something I want. We have resources available. So the Alano Club of Portland is generally where I'll tell people to go and pick up. So if you're local to Portland, Oregon, or like Multnomah County specifically, that's where I'll tell people to go and pick up. You can also head to Outside In, although they tend to use their resources much more in the houseless community, which is great. Like they're doing incredible work on the ground there. And so we have Narcan available for pickup at the Alano Club of Portland. We also, if you live outside, I mean, like if you are insured and have good insurance, you can go and pick it up through a pharmacy for free. If you're ever in a situation where they're asking you to pay for it, you can definitely email me and we can get that to you. And then if you're outside of Portland, or if you have like mobility issues or any issues like you need it to be shipped to you discreetly, we have the mail-based program through Next Distro. So there are some parameters that need to be met. Typically, we ship to all over Oregon. So every single city in Oregon will ship, and that can get a little excessive.
Yeah, for sure.
It's great because on the one hand, it says that everybody wants Narcan, which is amazing, but it can also be difficult to like be mailing out,
right.
X
to
amount
get
of
people quickly and like have that bandwidth to take on
so
that much.
I recommend, if you're on foot and you have the mobility and the access to it, just head to the Alano Club and pick up Narcan, or like go and pick it up from a pharmacy. And only if you have insurance. Like I said, if they're gonna, or like I have Narcan available. So,
is there any advice that you could give to people who are maybe in a state where it's not easily accessible, and like what they can do to get involved, or make a change in where they're living so that they can give it up? Or
I think so. The first thing, I mean, like I started this by doing it on foot. Like I figured out where I could get some Narcan. What's insane is that there are so many cost issues around Narcan, like purchasing Narcan. I will say that the intramuscular naloxone, it comes in a little clear glass vial, significantly cheaper. Also to train on. So if anyone's coming up against issues getting Narcan, it's really easy. It's a lot easier and more cost effective to get naloxone. What I'll say is that it's always great to get involved with the folks who are already doing the work. I have learned a lot from other members of the community who have been working in harm reduction for a long time. And especially like I didn't want to step on any toes. That's why I kept my primary focus in the restaurant industry, because I felt that was an area that wasn't getting served enough. But what I will say is like, it can be difficult. Talk to your like health authority, talk to like, we do a lot of work with Multnomah County. Like we go through Care Oregon and the state clearinghouse for a lot of our Narcan. There's always ways if you decide to start your own nonprofit and get a 501c3, there are a lot easier ways to get access to Narcan. Otherwise, I would say just like find an organization like nearest to you that has access to Narcan. The internet is a great tool and a great resource. I think the other thing is that most states have their own Next Distro. That is the website. And so what's really easy is if you go through that and you see one that's like linked to the state or the city that you live in, you can just give them a call, see if they need any help distributing. There's always work to be done, and there's always there's a place for everybody to do this work.